Hello guys, welcome to another video tutorial on the Code Angle YouTube channel. In today's video, we'll be creating a crash course with Firebase and Angular. So quickly, let me show you a demo of today's project. So I head straight to the applications tab. Then on the landing page, we have just a single button that says create a new note. Once I click on this new note, we get presented with a modal. So the modal has two input fields, the title and the description. Now, before I proceed, you should take notes that this application is a CRUD application. That is, we'll be able to create, we'll be able to read, update, and delete data. So quickly, let me create this new data here. So I'm just going to type in a bunch of random character. In fact, let me just type in title 1 and then description 1 and then click create notes. Then we get presented with an alert box that says notes added successfully. Once I click on OK, then you can see that the form gets reset. Then I can close the modal, and then when I head to the backend in Firebase, you can see that a new document has been created for us, and the document contains the title and the description we just created, as well as an ID which is automatically generated for us. I can proceed to create 3 more notes to see how this looks like. So if you take a look at the page, you can see the cards which contains each of the data of the notes is stacked properly. That is, there are 3 cards for each row, so which makes it looks nice. And if we proceed to check the backend, that is the Firestore database of our application, you can see we have 4 documents generated for us, with each document containing its own unique ID, as well as the notes title and the notes description. So let's perform other functionalities that this application can do. The next thing we want to do is to test out the update functionality. For instance, you can take a look at this title 4. It's not spelled correctly, so I'm gonna edit and then try to correct it properly by typing in title 4, and then for the description, I can give it an uppercase D and then click on update notes, and we get presented with an alert box that says notes updated successfully. If I click on OK and then close the modal, you can see title 4 and description 4 both get edited, and as well in the backend, if I check the data for that particular document, it's gonna get updated as well, as you can see. So let's implement the delete functionality. So I can just choose to delete probably the 4th note, that the note with the title 4. Once I click on delete, we get presented with a confirm box from the browser that says, are you sure you want to delete these notes? If I click on cancel, the notes does not get deleted, but if I click on the delete icon once more, then I click on the OK button, the notes gets deleted. I can delete 1 more note, probably this particular note. As you can see, we have only 2 notes left, and if I check the backend once more, we are presented with just 2 documents. Everything gets implemented on the fly, which is one of the qualities of the Cloud Firestore. Also, if I refresh the page, you get presented with this nice loader that displays why the data is being fetched from the Cloud Firestore. So with that, we can proceed to start implementing this application. If you are new to this channel, make sure you like as well as subscribe as a form of support, which enables me create more awesome content. And without wasting much time, let's get started. Now, to get started with this crash course, I want to do everything from scratch. That is, I want everyone who is new to Firebase and Angular to be able to follow along with this tutorial. So to generate a new Angular project, we need to type in the command ng new, and then the name of the project. We can call our project CRUD because it's a CRUD application. Then we'll be presented with a couple of prompts. The first prompt is focused on whether we need Angular routing, but for this project, I don't think we do, so I'm going to select no. Then we're going to have to select the type of CSS styling we want, whether it's XCSS, SAS, or less. I'm going to proceed with CSS, and then the new project is going to get generated for us. And while this is being implemented, I think we can set up the backend of our Firebase. If you are new to Firebase, you can just go to console.firebase.google.com, and then your Google accounts can be used to create a new Firebase application. As you can see, I have different projects already created on this account, so I'm just gonna click on add new projects to generate a new project, and I'm gonna call this Fire CRUD, and then click on continue, and we'll be asked if we want to enable Google Analytics for this project. We don't need Google Analytics, so I'm going to just click create project, and a new project would be generated for us. As you can see, the new project has been generated. I can click on continue, and then we get navigated to the Firebase dashboard. What we need to do now is to get the project settings, which contains the information we need to integrate into our Angular application, information such as the app ID and the likes. So I'm going to click on the web icon over here, and then we get asked to give our application a nickname. I can just give this one CRUD. And then we have a checkbox asking us if we want to set up hosting. We will not be hosting this application, so I'm just going to click register app from there, and then we are going to be presented with our project settings details, as we can see below. So this is what we need: this Firebase config object. We need to set it up in our environmental variables file in Angular. In my previous video, I was able to show us how we integrate this in our Angular application, but I'm gonna do that also in this video. So what I'm gonna do now is to grab this Firebase config object and then check if our Angular application has been generated successfully. As you can see, the new project has been generated for us, so I need to navigate into the project directory, which is called CRUD, and then open up the project in Visual Studio Code. Before I proceed, I would like to increase the font size of this application, and then in the SRC directory, I need to locate the environment folder. The environment folder contains two files: the production environment file and then the non-production, that is the development environment file. So we're going to be making use of the environment development file since this app is not yet on production, and the Firebase config object is going to be within this environment variable which we have here. So I'm going to paste it right in, and then instead of us having the equals to sign, we're going to have a colon right there, and then as you can see, we have the API key, the auth domain, project ID, storage bucket rather, the messaging sender ID, as well as the app ID, and production is set to false. So the next thing we need to do is to install Firebase in this project, and to install Firebase we need to make use of the @Angular Firebase package by making use of npm. So if I click on this result right here and then check the npm landing page, we can see the installation command, which is npm install @Angular Fire. So I'm gonna grab that, and then in my terminal I'm gonna paste it. I'm gonna grab the installation command, and then in my terminal I'm gonna paste it right in and then press enter. So with that, we'll have access to the latest version of Firebase, which is the Firebase that makes use of modular importation, and then we can just head to the GitHub repository of this particular package. There we'll have some of the commands we'll need to set up the application in our app module.ts file. So if you scroll down, we're going to grab some of the information we have right here and then inject it into our application. So while we're waiting for the Angular Firebase npm package to install, I'm going to set up Bootstrap as well as the Bootstrap icon, because we're going to make use of icons as well. So to set up Bootstrap, I'm going to grab the Bootstrap CDN. So I just type in Bootstrap 5. I'm going to be making use of Bootstrap 5 right here, and then click on introduction to Bootstrap 5, and then we have this CSS CDN link as well as the JavaScript CDN link. We're going to grab both of them. So I'm going to grab the CSS link first, and then we're going to inject it in the head section of our index.html file. So within the head tag, I'm just going to paste it right in, and then I'm going to grab the JavaScript CDN link as well, and then I'm gonna paste that within the body of our index.html file, and then I press save. And in our environment.ts file, I'm seeing we have an error somewhere, so I'm gonna quickly check that. Okay, we have a colon right here, so it's supposed to be a comma which separates the Firebase config from the production variable. So that has been taken care of right now. So next up, we need to get the Bootstrap icon. The Bootstrap icon can be gotten by searching for Bootstrap icons on the Google search, and then we'll be making use of the icon with the version 1.3.0. So once I click on that, we'll have access to the CDN as well. So we don't need to run npm install to get that installed in our project. So I'm just going to grab the link tag right here, which is also going to be in our index.html file right in the edge section. So now we have access to Bootstrap 5. We have access to the Bootstrap 5 icons as well. So probably we can just proceed to start setting up the design of our page. To do that, we need to generate a new component, but meanwhile we don't know if our Firebase npm package has been installed. So let me check the terminal, and as you can see, at Angular Fire version 7.4.1 has been installed successfully on this project. The next thing I'm going to do is to generate our components. We're going to be making use of one single component, that is the node component in this application. So to generate a new component, I'm going to run the command ng generate component and then the name of the component, which is notes, and then I press enter. Now we can see the notes component has been generated. Let me head straight to Visual Studio Code, and within the app directory we can see the notes folder, and it has the CSS file, the HTML file, the testing file, as well as the TS file. So I'm gonna close the environment file, and then I'm going to close the index.html file. So we can just begin the design of our app component.html. So since we already have Bootstrap 5 set up, so let's quickly create the design. The first thing we need to have is to ensure we have a div that has the class container, so everything is going to stack up nicely. So I'm just going to press enter. So inside the container div, we're going to have to design our card. Now during the sample I was showing, we can see that we have a set of cards stacked up nicely. So to do that, we're going to have a new div which is going to have the class row. So div row, and then inside the div row we're going to have a column. So inside the row tag we're going to have a column which is going to have a medium size of 4. So we're going to create div, and then I'm going to have call md-4. So what this does basically is to divide the page into 3 different parts. So the next thing we need to do is to create the div with a class of card and card body. So I'm going to have a div with a class of card and a class of card body. All these divs, all these classes are coming from Bootstrap 5, and within this div we can have a title, and in our title we're gonna give it an h5 tag, and inside the h5 tag rather, we're gonna have a text that says notes, title, implementation, and the description is gonna have a p tag. The p tag is gonna have a class of text muted. This will make it a little bit of gray, so we can just say lorem tab. So we just generated a bunch of random characters from lorem ipsum test. So next thing is to create a div that contains both of our icons. So we're going to have 2 icons, the icon for the delete functionality as well as the icon for the edit functionality. So I'm going to create a div tag, and then it's going to have a class of deflex, and then it's going to align the items, to the center. So I press enter. As you can see, we now have a div, and inside this div we're going to have 2 icons. So the first icon is going to be our edit icon. So we can just create an I tag, and inside this I tag we're going to have a class. These classes will be coming from the Bootstrap icons. So the first one is going to be bi-pen, while the second icon, let me duplicate this, the second icon is going to be bi trash, that is for the delete. The trash doesn't have an h. I'm going to remove the h. So for now I need to save and see how the page looks. So I'm going to save, and then since we don't have router implemented, what I'm going to do is to grab the selector which is app-notes, and then head straight to our app component.html file where we have the boilerplate generated for us. So I'm going to select everything inside of this file, clear it off, and then paste our app selector right here, and then click on save. So let's try to start up the server by running ng-serve-o to open the browser automatically. As you can see, our app has now been compiled successfully, and then we can see the browser and see how our card looks. It's close enough to what we have in the demo, but I need to add some CSS class. To do that, I'm going to head straight to style.css, and inside of styles.css, the first thing I'm going to do is to give it a general class of body, and inside the body we're going to have a background color of white as well as a margin top of 20px. Next thing we're going to do is to add a little bit of styling to the card class. So I'm going to say dot card, and inside of the card we can give it a position of relative, and then we can also give it a display of flex, and then the flex direction is going to be column. Then we can give it a mean width of 0. The word wrap is going to be break word, and then we give it a background color of white as well, background color FFF, which is also used for white. And then the border could be 0, solid, and then transparent. Then the border radius, you can give it a border radius of probably 1. This is going to add a bit of roundness to the edges. And then finally, inside of the card, I can give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. Margin bottom, well, let's increase that as much as 30 pixels. And I think that's all for the card. Then let me style the card body as well. So dot card dash body, that's going to have just 2 conditions for the CSS. So the flex is going to be 1 auto. What this does basically is to make the item to be sized according to its width and height, and also right below it we can give it a padding of 1.5 rem. And I think that's all. So I'm going to save this and see if there are any changes in the UI on the browser. As you can see, the entire card is blending together with the background of the body. I don't like that. I think I'm going to change the background color. So instead of having a background color of white, I'm going to have something like ED, F1 and F5. I think that should allow the card to show much more appropriately. So let me save that and then head straight to the browser and wait for it to refresh. As you can see, we can now see how the background color of the card is showing. It's visible to the page, and we can see the main background of the entire page. So now that that is implemented, we need to give the icons a little bit of spacing. As you can see, the edit icon and the delete icon are almost touching each other. So what I'm going to do is to wrap each of them in a span. So to do that, I'm going to create a span tag, and inside of the span tag, I'm going to give it a class of mx-2, and then break this down, grab the edit icon and place it right inside of it. So I'm going to do the same thing for the trash icon. So I'm going to create a span with a class of mx-2, and then grab the trash icon and paste it right inside of it, and then save. And as you can see, we now have some spacing between them. Next up, what we need to do is to implement the modals for our application. So we're going to implement 2 modals: the modal for when we create a new note, and the modal for when we want to edit that specific note. So we need to head straight to the Bootstrap 5 documentation and then search for modal. And once we search for modal, we can scroll down to the bottom of the page, somewhere around here, where we have these 3 buttons. If I click on one of the buttons, you can see we have a modal similar to what was showed to us in the demo at the beginning of this project. So what I'm going to do is to grab one of the buttons right here. So this is going to be the modal for the create note functionality. So I'm going to paste it within the container tag. So this button, so for this button, I'm going to edit the text to create a new note, and then I'm going to remove this particular attributes. So the attribute that controls the display of the modal is this data bs target attribute. So I'm going to edit it to add notes modal. So add notes modal. So I'm going to grab the body of the modal we have here. So I'm going to copy that and then paste it somewhere around here, still within the body of the container class. So I'm just going to paste it here, and then I'm going to edit the ID. The ID has to tally with the data bs targets attribute to have here. So I'm going to grab this add notes modal, and then the ID, I'm going to remove the example modal text we have there and then paste that right in. And we can add a note that says add notes modal, and then add a comment, and then I'm going to save, and we're going to try this out right now on the page. The notes button is not looking too nice, so I'm going to add some spacing. So what I'm going to do is to give it a class of my3 and then save, so that looks better. So I'm going to click on create new notes. As you can see, the modal displays appropriately. So what I'm going to do is just to edit the text we have here, which is send message. Instead, what we want to have there is add new notes. So quickly, instead of send message, I'm gonna have add note rather. So add notes seems better, and then if I save, that would be what will show on the page. So for the edit modal, what would control the edit modal is going to be this icon we have right here. So what I'm gonna do is just to duplicate what we have in this button right here. That is, we're gonna grab the two attributes we have here, the attributes that signifies that we are trying to display a modal, which is this database toggle, which has a property of modal, and the database target, which has an id of add notes modal. So I'm going to grab these two tests, and then inside the icon tag within it, I'm just going to paste it right there, and then I'm going to edit the add notes modal. So this will be, instead of add, it will be edit. So it will be edit notes modal. So we need to duplicate the add notes modal. So I'm going to grab everything we have there and then duplicate it, and then we'll have to edit the second modal we have there, which is add. I'm going to call it edit notes modal, and then the id as well needs to be edited. So I'm going to grab this edit notes modal hashtag we have in the icon, and then change the id from add notes modal to edit notes modal. So as you can see, we have two modals showing, the one for the add notes and then the one for the edit notes modal. So I'm going to save to see if this works. To know if it works, I'm going to change the button from add notes to update notes. So, and this recipient is going to be notes title, and then the message is going to be notes description. Same thing applies to the add notes modal. The recipient is going to be notes title, and then the message is going to be note description. So I'm going to save. So we already checked the create notes modal. That is, when I click on create a new note, we have this add notes button displaying. So let's test out the icon for the update notes. Once I click on the update notes, you can see the update notes modal shows as well. So we now have our UI implemented the way we want. So the next thing we need to do is to set up Firebase and then create the services that would implement the CRUD functionality we want to do in this project. We already have Firebase installed in this project. What we need to do is to set it up. To do that, I'm going to head straight to the documentation on GitHub of Angular Fire. So when I scroll down, I need the importation of the provide Firebase app and the initialize app, as well as the get Firestore and the provide Firestore. So I'm going to grab the two lines we have right there and then paste it in our app module.ts file. So I can just paste it right here. We don't need to get app, so I'm going to get rid of that. So to set up the first one, which is the initialize app, what I'm going to do is to head straight to our import array, and within the import array, I'm going to head back to that documentation and then grab the two lines we have here and then paste it right in. We have the provide Firebase app, which would contain the initialization. The initialization would contain the environment.firebase config, which we created earlier in the project. So to do that, we need to import environment. So I'm going to type in environment, and then I need to grab, to import it right here, I need to make use of the IntelliSense. As you can see right up here, we have environment from src environments, and then we're gonna do .firebase config. So with that, the initialization of our application is complete. So for the provide Firestore, we need to just call the get Firestore, and that's all we need to do. And with that, we have the Angular Firestore connected to this project. So what we need to do next is to generate the service to implement the CRUD functionality. So quickly, I'm just going to type in ng generate service, and I'm going to call the service note. While the service is being generated, I need to create a new file. This file is going to be within the app directory. So this file would contain the interface of our implementation. So within the app directory, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it notes.ts. So this notes.ts, I need to export. So I'm going to type in export interface notes. It's going to be in form of an object, and it's going to contain three things, because our backend is going to contain the three things, which are the ID, the notes title, and the notes description. So they are all strings. So I'm going to give it give the ID a type of string. The note title, that is note underscore title, is also going to have a type of string. And lastly, the note description, note underscore description, is going to be a type of string as well. So we need to import this interface inside of our service. So to do that, we can see the service has been generated for us. So all we need to do is to type in import notes from, this is within the same level, so I just have to do ./notes, and then we have access to our interface, note interface. So next up, we're going to be making use of the different functions available in Firestore by default. So what I need to do here is to import. The first thing I need to import is the Firestore itself. So I'm going to type in Firestore, which is coming from at angular.fire/firestore, and then we need to inject this in our constructor. To do that, we need to type in private, because it's going to be a private variable. So private Angular Firestore, and then we call the Firestore, and with that we'll have access to it anywhere within our node service file. So the first service function we're going to create is the function to add a new node. So let me add a comment here that says add a new note. So to add a new note, let's create a function called add note, and then it's going to take in the reference of our interface. So I'm going to have notes. The notes parameter is taken in the notes interface reference. So we need to generate an ID. So to generate an ID, I'm going to say notes.id is equals to, so I'm going to make use of a function called doc, which is coming from the Angular Firestore as well. So I need to import it within Angular Firestore. As you can see above, we now have doc available right here. So the doc is going to take in a collection, which we also need to import from Angular Firestore. So the collection is going to take in the reference to our Angular Firestore as well as the ID. So what do I mean by this? So I'm going to say this dot Angular Firestore, which is our Firestore. Then we're going to type in the ID and then say dot ID. So this enables us to generate an ID automatically anytime we create a new note in our application. So we need to return the add doc function. This enables the document to be added to our Firestore backend. So I'm going to call add doc, which we also need to import in the Angular Firestore. So add doc is going to take in the collection as well. So collection, which we already imported above. So it's going to take in reference to our Firestore. So this.afs. So the second argument is going to take in the name of the collection we want to create, which is going to be called notes. So notes, and then we now pass in the notes parameter we created above, which now contains the ID, so which enables the ID to be attached to this particular collection that will be added in Firestore database. So that's the implementation for the add notes service. So the next one is the get notes service. So I'm going to call this get all notes. So to get all notes, I'm going to create a new function called get notes, and then the get notes is going to take in an observable with the notes reference we created above. So it's going to be an empty array. We need to import the observable from RxJS, that is the reactive JavaScript extension. So yeah, I think the IntelliSense works properly. Why are we having this error? Okay, we haven't created anything within the function. I think that's why we have this error. So once I create a new variable, which is going to be the document reference, so I'm going to say let notes reference, since we already created the notes at this stage. So the notes reference is going to be making reference to the collection, and within the collection we have two arguments. The first one is the Angular File service, and then the second one is the notes collection we already created in the backend. So that's what we have. I'm still getting this error. Okay, we've not returned anything. We need to return something for the error to get rid of itself. So what we need to return now is the collection data within our Firestore database. So to do that, I'm going to type in return. So what are we returning? We need to return the collection data, which we need to import above in our Firestore. So collection data is going to take in the notes reference we create right above. So notes ref. So the notes ref as well as the ID field within the collection. So to do that, we can destructure it to the objects and say ID field, and then give it a reference of the ID, and then make it an observable of notes, which we have right here. So I'm going to grab this observable notes. So we are returning it as an observable of notes. So that's all we need to do to get the notes from our backend, that is our Angular Firestore. So the next thing we need to do is to implement the delete notes service function. So to delete a note, I'm going to create a function called delete notes. So this is going to take in an argument of notes, and then it's going to reference our interface, which is notes. So within this delete notes, we need to create, that is make reference to our notes with the specific ID. We need to make reference to the document reference with the specific ID we want to delete. So to do that, we need to create a variable called docref. So I'm going to call this docref. Docref is equals to doc, and this doc takes in this .afs, that is our Firestore, and then takes in the notes. This time around, we need to make use of backticks because we need to access the ID of the particular note we want to delete. So I'm going to make reference to the collection, and then it's going to be / make use of the $sign, then the parameter above we created, which is notes, and then we're going to access the ID. So with that, we'll be able to delete the specific notes of a particular collection. So we need to return the delete doc function and then pass in the docref. So to do that, I can just type in return delete doc, which is also something we need to import right above in our Firestore because it's a Firestore function. So I'm going to pass in the docref. So if we scroll above, you can see all what we've imported so far. We've imported the add doc function from Firebase, and then I think to make this much more readable, what I'm going to do is just to give it each of them their own line. We've imported the collection data, the delete doc, the doc, as well as Firestore itself. So the final function we need to create to make our CRUD functionality complete is the update note. So I'm going to create a comment that says update a note. So to update a note, I'm going to call the function update note. So the update note is going to take in two arguments. The first argument is going to be our note interface, while the second one is going to be the note object we need to update. So I'm going to pass in notes. I think I'm going to give it a type of any as at this point. So within the update notes, I'm going to create the document reference just like we created above. So I'm going to grab this in what we created, the document ref in the delete notes, and I'm going to paste it right here because it's almost doing the same thing, but this time around we do not need to access the collection. So I'm going to remove the collection we have here. Collection, we don't need that. What we just need is the document reference that has access to the Firestore as well as the note ID, and the same thing we have here. We just need access to the Angular Firestore as well as the ID for us to get the document reference. Now we need to return the update doc function from Firebase. So I'm going to type in return. What are we returning? We're returning the update doc. So I'm going to type in update doc, which you also need to import into the Angular Firestore above, and then we need to pass in two arguments. The first argument is the doc reference we created within this function, which gives us access to that particular note we want to update, and the second one is the note object we want to update. So I'm just going to grab the notes and then paste it right in, and with that, our CRUD functionality for the service is now implemented. So all we need to do is just to integrate this in our component file. Now to get started with the service integration in our notes component.ts file, we need to make use of reactive forms in this project. So before I proceed, I would like to implement that in our app module.ts file. So within the import array, I need to call the reactive forms module. So I need to import as well as inject this, which we can see here within our app module.ts file. So I'm going to save and then close that up. So right now within our node component, we need to bring in some API which is available in the reactive forms module by default. We need to import this from the @angular forms. So the three things we need to bring in is the form builder, the form group, as well as validators. So to do that quickly, I'm going to import form builder, form group, as well as validators. All this is coming from @angular forms. Then we also need to import our node service. So to import our node service, right in the constructor, I can just make use of IntelliSense to do that. Instead of typing in the import, I can just say private node, then node service. It's going to automatically get imported for us, as you can see right above. Then this note, I think I'm going to give it note underscore service. So for us to know anytime we want to make reference to it within our function, we need to know that we are calling the node service. So to avoid any form of confusion, we also need to inject the form builder as well. So I'm going to call this private form builder. then form builder. Our implementation for the reactive forms is going to be within the constructor. So we need to name our form by making reference to the form group. This form for the add, because the first implementation we want to make now is how to add a new node. So to know how to add a new node, we need to set up the form in our app component.ts file as well as our app component.html file. So the configuration for the TS file is what we are currently doing by importing the builder, the form group, as well as the validators. So now we need a reference to the form group, and I'm going to call the name of this form node form, and it's going to have a type of form group, and we get an error that says the initializer is not defined or assigned. So at the end of the node form, I can just put in an exclamation mark to get rid of that error. And then within the constructor, then I can make reference to the node form by saying this dot node form, and it's gonna take in the form builder we created in the constructor. So I'm gonna say this dot form builder, which is gonna dot group, which is gonna take in an object, and we just have two input fields we need to configure: the title as well as the description. That was seen in the model we created when we were implementing the UI. So I'm gonna type in title, and then the title is gonna take in an array. The first array is gonna be empty by default, that is for the initial states, while the validators is the second argument in this array. So it's going to be required. So I'm going to type in validators.required. So the same thing is going to apply to the description. So description takes in an array. The first one is empty by default, and the second element within the array is going to be required. So we pass in validators.required. I'm going to get rid of the void in this ng on init. So now we need to create our add node function. So to do that, I'm going to type in add node, and it's gonna take a parenthesis as well as a bracket. So within the add nodes, we need to destructure the value from the node form. So I'm gonna type in const and then value, and I'm gonna say this dot node form, and I'm gonna console log the value in the console. That's repetitive, right? So to do that, we still need to configure our node components.html file by passing in the form group as well as the form control name. So quickly, let's head straight to our node component, and in the add modal tag, in the add modal parts, we look for the form which contains our input field for the title, and then the input field for the description. The description has a text area, which is fine as well. So within the form tag, we need to bind the form group we created in our TS file by making use of this bracket and then typing the name of the form. The name of the form is called node form. So I'm going to grab this node form and then paste it right in. And then in each of the input fields, the first one, which is the title, is going to have a form control name, which is going to be called title because that's the name we gave it in our CS file within our form group. That is our form builder. We gave it a name of title and description. So the second one is also going to be called description, and that's going to be in the text area. So I can just grab this form control name, copy it, and within the text area, I can just give it a name of description, and that's all we need to do. So I'm going to save everything thus far and then try to log our results in the console. So we haven't started the server. I'm going to just type in ng-serve and wait for the application to compile. So while we're waiting for that, while we're waiting for the application to compile, I noticed I have not added the click event handler for our add nodes, because to add the nodes, we need to initialize this function in our HTML file. So I'm going to copy the add nodes, and then it's going to be a click event handler. So we need to make reference to the click, and then it's going to be is equals to the add nodes function, and then it's going to have a parenthesis here at the end. Get rid of the extra comma we have right there. So with that, anytime we click on the add node button, it should fire off this function we have right here, which is the add node. So let's see if our application has finished compiling. As you can see, it has. So I head straight to the browser and then I refresh the browser, and quickly I click on the create node modal, and then within the title I type in title, and within the description field I type in description, and then I click on add nodes. As you can see, an object gets displayed within the console which contains the description as well as the title. So we can now send this data to our Firebase Firestore backend. So we can begin the implementation for that. So the first thing we need to do is to import our nodes interface. So to import our nodes interface, I'm gonna create a local variable here called nodes object. So nodes object, and then we'll make reference to the nodes interface, and then we can say is equals to the ID initial state is empty, the nodes title the initial state is empty, as well as the notes description, and the initial state is empty as well. So we need to configure this in our add notes function. So within this function, we can just pass in the value by saying this dot notes object dot id. The id which will be automatically generated for us in Firebase is going to be empty by default at the first stage, while this dot note title, so I can just say this dot note object dot note underscore title is equals to the value of each of the form fields we pass. So this is going to be value dot title, which contains the value of our input field. So we need to do the same for the description. So I'm just going to copy this down. So instead of title, what we have here is description, and then note underscore description. Perfect. Now we can now call our note service by saying this dot note underscore service. So the function we want to call is the add note function, which we created in a note service. So I'm going to say dot add notes. So this helps us to add a note, and it takes in a variable which is what we want to pass to the backend. So which is this dot note object. So this dot note object. Then it returns a promise. So we make use of the dot then keyword, and then we say note. Within the notes promise, we can say if the note gets returned, then do the following. The first thing we want to do is to alert the user by displaying the message note added successfully, before we now finally reset the form by typing in this dot note form dot reset, and that's all we need to do. So I'm going to save, and before we proceed, we have a new Firebase project created, so I need to set up some things. So I'm going to head to the Firebase dashboard, and then we click on the Firestore database and click on create database, and then we need to determine what mode we want the database to be. We are currently doing a test, so I'm going to select the test mode and then click on next. Then we need to select a cloud Firestore location. I'm fine with the name 5 US Central. You can select the one that is closer to your location for better latency. So I'm going to click on enable, and then a provisional class Firestore. Then our cloud Firestore gets created. So we have a cloud Firestore created for us, but everything here is empty. But let's test it out by creating a new document. So what I'm going to do is click on create new notes, and then type in a note title. So I'm going to say test title, and then test description. And then I'm going to click on add notes to see if this works well. And as you can see, we have the alert box that says notes added successfully. I'm going to click OK. The state of our form gets reset to empty, and then I'm going to check the backend to see if it's already there. And as you can see, our notes document has been added, which contains text title as well as text description, and an ID is generated for us automatically. So that works pretty well. So what I want to do next is just to add some validation by disabling the button if the form is invalid. So in our HTML file within the add modal button, so I'm going to make use of the disable attribute. So we make use of this bracket and call it disabled. So the form will be disabled if it's invalid. So I'm going to say node form dot invalid. So I'm going to save once more and then test out the invalid button implementation. And what we'll do this time around is to try to add a new note without adding anything to the input field. You can see the button is unclickable. If I add a title by saying testing again, and then without adding a description, the button still remains disabled because we made both the title and the description required. So let me type in the description and say testing description again, and then click on add notes. So this note will be added to the backend on the fly. If I check our database once more, we have a new collection in the documents, or we have a new document in our collection rather. So this is working fine. We can now successfully add data to our backend. So the next thing I want us to do is to make these notes in the page dynamic. Currently what we are displaying here is just static data, as you can see right here. This is what we are displaying on the page, but rather I want what we are displaying to be coming from this database backend. So to do that, we need to create a new function in our TS file, and this is going to be to be able to get all the notes, that is read all the notes. So quickly I'm going to type in the get all notes function. So get all notes, gonna give it a parenthesis, and then it's gonna have a bracket like all functions do. So the first thing I need to do is to access the get notes from the backend. So I'm just gonna do this dot note service notes underscore service dot get notes, and then it returns an observable. So I'm gonna subscribe to this observable by calling the subscribe keyword, and then we we give it a response keyword, and the response is going to take a type of note. So it's going to have an empty array as the initial value. So what we can do now is to log the response to the console. So I'm just going to type in console.log response. Before I save, I need to call this get all notes within our ng on a init lifecycle hook. So I'm going to say this dot get all note, and then I'm going to save. So let's check the browser and see if we have the notes displayed in the console. As you can see, we have the two notes displayed in the console in an array of objects. The first node shows the first node we created from the backend. The second node testing again. The first one is test title. So now we can look through this, making use of the ng directive in Angular, and then display the data on the page. So quickly, let's head to our notes component.cs file. So we need to attach this to a variable. So what I'm going to do is somewhere around here at the top, I'm going to create a notes variable. So I'm going to give it the type of any, and then it's going to be an empty array at the initial stage. So I'm going to attach the reference to this variable. So I'm going to say this dot note is equals to res. So now we can now look through these notes in our template file. So I head to this template file. So we need to look through it somewhere around here. So I think the best place to do it is within the column. So within the column, I'm just going to make use of the ng4 directive. So ng4 is equals to, which will be let note of note. So now we can now pass in the title and the body by making use of interpolation. So I'm going to get rid of this static text we have right here and make use of the double bracket. So this will be note dot, let's check the console once more. So this will be note title. So I'm going to grab the note title. So notes dot note title. So for the description, I'm going to get rid of this static text we have here. Make use of the double bracket once more. So it will be note dot, let's grab what we have in the console, note dot note description, and I think I can save, and then let's see if we have a dynamic note displaying on the UI. Oh, we didn't save the TS file, so I'm going to save that as well. That's why we're having the error on the browser. So perfect. We now have our two notes displaying on the page. The next thing we need to do is to implement the functionality to delete a specific note. So to do that, I'm going to head straight to the note component ts file once more. Then let's create the delete note function. So I'm going to call this delete note, and then it's going to take in an argument of note with a reference to our note interface. And then within the delete note, we need to create a confirm box. So I'm going to create a variable called let confirm or let decision. Let's call it decision. So it's going to take in the confirm alert box, which is coming from the browser. So we can just ask the user a specific question that are you sure you want to delete this note? So it's going to provide them with two alternatives, that is the yes or no. So if they say yes, the note is going to get deleted. If they say no, the state remains the same. So I can just create a variable that says if the decision is true, what we want to do is to call the delete note function in the service. So to do that, I'm going to say this dot note service, note underscore service dot delete notes, which is going to take in the notes variable. I think we didn't name the function properly in our service, so I'm going to check the note service right now. Is it delete notes? Does it have an s at the end? Oh, it has an s. I think we just want to delete a single note, so I'm going to remove the s. It's supposed to be delete notes. Let me save that and then head back to our component.ts file. So it's going to be delete notes. So if the decision of the user is true, then the notes will get deleted. But for the notes to get deleted, we need to still implement this function in our HTML file. So we need to locate the icon that contains the trash. So this icon is going to contain the delete functionality. So this is going to be a click event handler. So I'm going to make it of click is equals to delete notes, which will now take in the notes variable we have right here while looping through the data. So that will enable the function to track the specific notes we clicked on. So I can save that as well, and then let's test it out on the browser. To be sure we do not have any form of error, I'm going to open the console and then let's try to implement the delete. So I'm going to try to delete this note at the top. So I'm going to click on delete, and we get presented with the confirm prompt, which says, are you sure you want to delete this note? If I say cancel, the note does not get deleted. But if I proceed to say yes, you can see the notes that get deleted, and then we just have one array of objects in the console. And if I check the database backend as well, we only have one object right there. So we can now proudly say read, that is the ability to be able to read create and delete functionality has now been implemented. So the final functionality is the update functionality. So I need to create a new function right below the delete node. So the new function is going to be called update node. This will be similar to how we created the add node. So I'm going to say update node. This is going to take in an argument of notes. Now we need to create a form for the update note functionality. So I'm going to copy this down just right below the note form, and I'm going to create a new form reference called edit form. I might as well call it update form, but let's call it edit form. Still works the same way. So edit form is going to have the same fields, the title and the description. So I'm going to make reference to that. So this dot edit form is equal to this dot form builder dot group. So the title, I'm going to say edited title, edited title. I didn't spell that correctly. And then this is going to be edited description, edited underscore description. So with that, we are good to go. And then within the update notes, I can just destructure that particular form by saying const value, just like we did in the add form. I can just say this dot edit form to be sure we are getting the right values in the form. I can just try to log out the values in the console, and to do that, we still need to set up our form control name as well as the form group in our HTML file. So we need to locate the form within the edit form modal. So since it's similar, I'm just going to grab this form group right here, scroll down to the edit form modal, and then the form tag right here, I'm going to paste it in, then call this edit form. And then same thing with the form control name. For the input field, the form control name is going to be what we named it in our CS file, which is edited form, or edited title rather, for the title. So this will be form control name, edited title. Then for the description, same thing applies. So within the text area, I'm gonna give it this form control name of edited description. I'm gonna grab that, head straight to the template, paste that right in. Now we can also make use of the click event handler for the update form. So I'm going to scroll down and then grab this update notes, and then in the button of the edit modal, I'm going to make use of a click event handler. So click is equals to update notes, taking a parenthesis, and then save that as well. The issue we have here is it's supposed to take in a variable, so and then save. So let's see if the value gets logged into the console. To have access to the form of the update modal, we need to click on the edit icon, and then I'm just going to type in a bunch of random strings here and then click on update notes. And as you can see in the console, we have the edited title as well as the edited description values. So with this, we can send this as an updated version to the Firestore database. So quickly, let's head straight to our function, that our update function. And then the implementation is going to be similar to what we did here in the add note. So I'm just going to grab some of the things we have right here. So I'm going to grab this and then paste it in right here. So the note object is going to take in the notes.id this time around to know the particular note we're trying to update. So this will be notes.id, which is the parameter we created right in the parenthesis here above. So instead of title, it's going to be edited title, and the description is going to be edited description. Perfect. Now we can now call the update notes service below. So I can just say this dot note service dot update notes, and then it's going to take in two arguments. The first one is the notes we have in our variable, in our parameter above. The second one is the note object. So I'm just going to say this dot notes object, and then it returns a promise which I can change to by making use of the dot then, and then make use of the arrow, and then within the arrow I can alert the user that the note has been updated successfully, and then resets the form just like I showed in the example at the beginning of the tutorial. So I'm going to call the alert box and just say notes updated successfully, and then we can now reset the form by saying this dot edit form dot reset. Yeah, this is perfect. So one more implementation I need to do, which I just realized, is when I head to the browser at the initial stage, I want the values of the form to display. That is, if I click on the edit modal for the edit icon for this particular field, I want the values to be pre-filled in each of these form fields, so I would know that okay, I'm editing for this particular note. But before we do that, let me create a new note once again. I can just say second title and then second description, and then add the notes. So we don't just have a single note, we have two notes we are dealing with, which we can update once we are done. So to get the values, what we can do is to head back to the template, and within the icon to edit, we need to create a new function for that. So I'm going to create this function right above the update note. So I'm going to call this function get note details. So details, get note details sounds better. So it's going to take in the note argument or parameter, and then I'm going to make reference to this by giving it a global variable right above, by calling it note details, and giving it a type of any. So I'm going to grab this note details, scroll down to the get note details function, and I'm going to reference it by saying this dot get note details is equals to notes. Now we need to implement this function in our template by passing it as a click event handler within our icon tag, that is the icon for the edit. So I'm going to give it a click event handler, and then the name we called it in our template, which is get note details, and it's going to take in the note variable which we looked through above. So now what I want to do is to log this dot note details to the console to be sure we are extracting that particular object, and we can set it as a prefiller in our form, prefilled in our form rather. So I'm going to save and then clear the console. So the first one I want to get is the second title. So once I click on the second title, I believe the details of the second title should show on the console. So let's click that. So as you can see, the ID, the description, as well as the title shows. So what I want to happen is to have these details in the console inside our input field by default. So I believe the same thing should apply when I click on this particular card. It shows the details of that particular note. Now let's bind the data of each of those modals inside our edit modal. So to do that, I'm going to make use of the value attribute. So the value attribute is going to be binded by accessing the notes details. So the first one is going to be value is equals to, so the value is going to be notes details. Let me grab the note details we have right here. Note details, I'm going to make use of optional chaining because it may take a little bit of time before it displays. So note details dot note title, if I'm not wrong, yeah, note title, note details dot note title, and then same thing for the description, note details dot note description. So if I save, I believe this time around when I click on the modal, the data should be prefilled in each of the modals. So let's click on the icon for the testing. So I can see the data gets prefilled. So testing again, testing description again. If I close and then I click for the second card, and then you can see second title and second description. So this is perfect. Now we know which card we are trying to update from the modal. So now we can implement the update notes. So to do that, we can just do what we did in the add notes by making use of the click event handler as well as a disabled attribute. So I'm going to grab everything we have right here and then scroll down to where we have, okay, we already have the update notes, but this time around the note is going to take in the notes details as a parameter, and then the disabled attribute, which is all I just need to grab right here because the fields are also being validated. So this time around it will be edit form. So that means if you want to edit, you need to touch both the title as well as the description before the button gets enabled. So I think we can test that out right now. So let's quickly do that. So I can just, okay, you can see by default the button is disabled. So if I add a title, edit title again, edit description again, and add a full stop, the button gets enabled. Then I can click on update notes, the form gets cleared, and then we get a modal that says notes updated successfully. When we close the modal, you can see testing title again is now appearing on the card, and same thing would be implemented on the back end. You can see the testing title again on the back end as well as the testing description again with the full stop on the notes description on the back end as well. So I think that's all for this tutorial. We've been able to implement the create, the read, update, and delete functionality by making use of the Angular Firestore, the latest version of the Angular Firestore, as well as the latest version of Angular as well. If you have any questions, drop it in the comment section below. Before I go, I think probably I should add a bonus to this tutorial by making use of the ngx-spinner. It's an npm package that helps us to display a nice spinner on the page before the data gets displayed. So to do that, I'm going to type in ngx-spinner, and we need to install it. So it's going to take it's not going to take so much of our time. So let's just quickly install this. So I'm going to stop the server and then I'm going to grab the installation command and then press enter. So while it's being installed, you can quickly set it up. So to set it up, the first thing we need to do is to follow the details we have here. We need to import it just like we are instructed to in this documentation. So we need to grab the custom element schema. This helps us to prevent any form of errors. So this can be implemented in the app module.ts file. So let's head to our app module.ts file, and right above in the Angular core, beside the ng module, we need to bring in the custom schema, and then we need to inject the custom schema as well. So just under Bootstrap, you can just put the custom schema then we need to bring in Angular animations. So I'm going to grab the Angular animations from Angular, and then also grab the spinner module itself, the ngx-spinner module, paste that in as well. So we need to, because it's a module, we need to import and inject it. So within the import array, let's inject it right there. The next step is to set it up in a component file. So we need to import it. So I'm going to import ngx-spinner inside a note component file. So I'm going to scroll up and then import ngx-spinner. We need to inject it as a service. So it's going to be a private service. So within our constructor, we can just quickly inject it right there. And then we'll be calling the spinner only when we want to show the data on our page, that is the initial stage. So to do that, I'm going to head to the get all notes function, and right above it, I can just say this dot spinner dot show. These are the states where the data has not been gotten from the backend, but the moment the data gets there from the backend, we want to hide it. So this dot spinner dot hide. So with that, we are done with that part of the ngx-spinner. So in the HTML part, we need to call the ngx-spinner right above. There are various configurations for it, but we're making use of the square jelly box. So to do that, I need to head straight to the documentation and then grab this particular ngx-spinner tag, and right above the class container, I'm going to paste it right in. So I'm going to change the type from ball scale to square jelly box, and then we can add some extra configurations by giving it the size of medium and then a color of white, then set full screen to true, and then we can add the text between that says loading. That's not really necessary, but we can just do that as well. The loading can be within a p tag, so let's just create a p tag right here so it won't be too big, and we can give the p tag a style color of white. Then let's grab this loading tag, loading text, and paste it right in here. I think that's all. I can save everything we've done so far, and then let's see if the package has been installed. As you can see, I think it has been installed successfully. I can just clear everything we have here and then restart the server by running ngserve, which I've done so many times in this crash course, and wait for the app to compile. Now that the app has compiled successfully, let's test this out by refreshing the page. Okay, we didn't inject the browser animations module. That's a mistake on my part. So quickly, let me inject that and then save once more. That's why we're getting that error in the console. For some reason, we're not getting the bouncing jelly box when we refresh. I think we need to check the documentation. Probably we're missing something. So yeah, I think we need to add this CSS animation to our angular.json configuration. So I think what we need to do is to grab this particular string we have here, and then like it says in the documentation, we need to add it to our angular.json configuration file. So I'm going to locate that file in the roots of our project, which is located right here, and within the styles array which we have here, I'm going to paste it right in. As you can see, it's within the styles array in the documentation. So one more thing we need to take note of is we need to grab it and then rename it as the type we named the ngx-spinner. For us, we named it square jelly box. So I need to rename this ball scape multiple to square jelly box, and then I need to save. So once I save it, I need to restart the server and then run ngserve once more, and this time around I believe the square jelly box should appear on the browser once we refresh the page. Now that the terminal has compiled successfully, let's check the page of our application and then refresh and see if we have the square jelly box. Perfect. So while the data is being fetched from the backend, the square jelly box appears. Let me refresh once more to see it once again. So now we can say we've completed this application. If you are new to this channel, once more, please do like and subscribe, and I'll try to create more awesome content. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. Stay blessed.